Welcome back to the program. Good morning. Please join me in welcoming my very good friend, Emil Lee, the host of St. Martin Insights News that matters to you. Good morning, sir. How are you today? Nice if
Great.
I turn your. Oh, you're there. You're there. Nice if I push the right microphone button. There we go.
I'm great today. Thank you for being here again. I'm
Thank
enjoying these shows very much.
Good.
So,
Getting lots of positive feedback.
for sure,
People enjoy the conversation. I think
the
the
witty banter.
well,
Yes.
the sarcastic banter. No, you know what I think that it was the model that you and I really, I think, agreed upon early on, and it all started with COVID. With the notion of asking the hard questions, but asking them in a professional way that doesn't or should not be offensive to anyone, but
Absolutely.
asking the hard questions and doing it the right way. And I think people truly enjoy that piece of it.
And you know what? I think I've even gotten feedback from the ministers that say, look, they actually appreciate having good questions. Things that because they're in it 24/7, and so they don't always think of all of the different angles, and so they were actually really happy sometimes to have questions coming from a different perspective. So
Yeah, for
even from
sure.
their side, I think there's some positivity. Some of them get nervous, but some of them really appreciate that
Well,
people are actually trying to expose things.
nervous is okay.
Yeah,
It means that you're on your toes, right?
exactly.
Right,
And with
and
me, they never know where it's coming. It could be out of left field, so it's hard to prepare for my questions, which I think is good. You get honest answers, and it's live. So
well, I also think to a certain extent, the notion of having an honest, hard dialogue or an honest discussion about things that matter to everyone, the taxpayers, is an okay thing.
yes,
Is an okay thing. There's nothing wrong with that.
and I will say, and credit to you as well for kind of giving me the latitude to approach it how I'd like to. But a lot of the other journalists, or not all, but some of them, really go for this sort of gotcha moment, right? Like they're trying to sort of pin you into something that makes you look bad, right? Whereas from our perspective, it's really about how do we make the country better? Giving suggestions to them about how to be more efficient, how to raise money. Things like yesterday, I'll tell you off the air afterwards. I approached the minister of Romy. He was talking about their whole process of reviewing building permits and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've really these past few months have really been getting into AI and trying to understand how it works. And I said, Minister, why don't you consider using AI to do your first evaluation of building permits? You can build a system that would allow you to just download all your building permits, and it will at least give you sort of a first quick glance if things are missing, and would help save you.
Point out the errors, point out the problems before
Right. So
that you need
before
to
you
have a
have to
human look.
spend exactly a whole lot of human hours reviewing it, if there's things that a standardized program could pull out, this would help you to go back to the people who are submitting, and they could, address it quickly. So everywhere else in the world is using AI, but St. Martin's in this little bubble. And so indeed, I'm always trying to give them suggestions how to make their job easier, make their ministry more productive, etc. So
And I think it's a especially when you take a government process that says, I need, I'm applying for X. X requires, these 10 things.
right.
Are the 10 things here? Yes or no? And do the 10 things contain each of the 10 have certain attributes that have to be there to make it be sufficient
Correct.
to support the application for whatever it happens to be? Are those things here?
Right.
And if not, where are the shortfalls? And then
And you're always going to have a person review that assessment, right? And so it just makes it faster. It just makes it easier. But
It brings me back to my earlier days in banking and in New York City. The company I used to work for, what we focused on, the name of the company was Pegasystems, and we focused on taking business rules. That procedure manual that said, okay, I'm hiring a new employee, and I have to do this and this and this, and have these forms, blah, blah. And it was a very labor-intensive process, but you could write and automate the business rules, right, and eliminate all the human intervention,
right,
and actually end up with a better product at the end.
yeah,
And that's really what this is about. It's not replacing humans, because at the
it's
end,
and and
garbage in,
and
garbage out.
and government says all the time they are short-staffed. They don't have enough people to do the work that they need to do. So if you can incorporate AI into your systems and help to make it
Mm.
streamline it and make it more productive, I mean,
There you go.
there you go.
There you go.
So a simple thing like yesterday, the minister of Romy brought up that he finally has removed the sailboat from Simpson Bay Beach.
Patrice Gomes, Minister of Rami, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This has been a work in progress since the boat has been on the
Well,
beach.
it sank apparently, I think February
February of
4th,
Yes.
2024. So we're about a year and a half,
Right.
right? And so, by all means, thank God that it's gone, right? But like a year and a half is not really something that you should be terribly proud of, right?
No, it should
It's
be.
fallen apart. Pieces have ended
Listen,
up on the beach,
well,
right?
listen. When that boat ended up on the beach, we had a very strong, unexpected southerly swell, and it broke its mooring. It ended up, and it floated in on the beach. The original owner, was on board when it happened,
Oh yeah.
to my knowledge,
Okay.
and um, he, or let's put it this way, the original owner was aware that it had broke. If he wasn't on board, somebody was on board when it broke. It ended up on the beach, and it ended up sitting on its keel, straight, with the bow, the front of the boat
So
pointing
pointing
out.
up,
Yeah, but
the mast was up.
the keel is the centerboard on the bottom of the sailboat,
Okay.
effectively, for
Yeah.
layman's term, right? The the bottom that was sitting upright, facing the front of the boat, the bow pointing out. So the way it was just sitting there and waiting to be pulled out. And I remember watching it happen. And somebody came with a dinghy and threw a line to it, a hard bottom, pretty big, and then tried to pull it off the beach. I think
Oh.
like the next day,
Okay.
and it was too small of a boat to do it with. But if you had a proper tug, like if somebody called Dion, the salvage guy,
Uh-huh.
he would have just come and pulled the thing right off the beach. It would have floated away, and would have not been a total loss. Um, Within about 48 hours, all of a sudden, it ended up not it. We had some waves. It turned around on its side and laid over. And the part that was facing the ocean was the bottom, right? So the waves were still hitting the bottom. It still, at that point, was salvageable. It was only probably after we had another heavy surf day that then it ended up being facing the other way, and then of course now the waves are now hitting the deck
And the
of the
water
boat.
is going inside.
Right, and then the underside filled with water, or the inside, the down below filled with water. The mast got destroyed. People started to steal stuff out of it, and then
Yeah.
it became spray painted, and it was a huge loss. And the sad part is, it could have been saved.
So the interesting, because this was one of my follow-up questions, and I tied it also with car wrecks. You see car wrecks on the side of the road sometimes for a long time before they get towed away, right? But he explained actually that the boat. So I remember this, that without documentation, apparently the owner gave it to a VKS officer, right?
Hmm.
And the guy was kind of happy, like, oh my gosh, I got a sailboat for free. But apparently, he then sold it without documentation to somebody else,
The
VKS
VKS, yeah,
officer, right?
also not legal. But go ahead, keep
Right.
going.
And so then government was stuck with this sort of quagmire of who's actually the owner of the boat, and eventually government's taken possession of the boat in order to remove it, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm like, there has to be a better process, right? If every time there's some sort of a wreck, it takes you a year and a half to move it, something's fundamentally wrong with your system, right?
Hmm.
So change the system. Same thing with these and go after who's ultimately responsible, figure it out and make them pay for your removal costs.
Right.
Same thing he said, he didn't throw out a number, but he said they spent a, a phenomenal amount of money removing car wrecks. And the car wrecks, you'll notice a lot of people pull off the license plates. But you can normally, I think there's like 3 different spots on a car that has the VIN number,
Right.
right? Like I know that for sure on the dash,
Yeah.
right? You can see it from outside. I know for sure on the driver's side door, you can find it there. And I think on the engine somewhere
Yeah.
you
No,
can
it's all,
find stamped
it's stamped into the car. You can't.
in multiple places. He says they're rubbed. So actually I saw 2 cars today on my way home. I'm gonna go see if I can find the VIN numbers, because if you just take a few of these people and hold them accountable for the cost of towing away the car, future car owners are going to think twice about just leaving their cars, and they're going to dispose of it hopefully in a more responsible way, right?
Right.
And as opposed to one of the MPs proposed that we should just add an extra fee to every car
Oh God.
and use that money to remove the wrecks, and this is the whole problem with new taxation and fees. The easiest thing, according to government, is all too often to make the people who are doing it correctly pay more money to compensate for the people who aren't doing it correctly, instead of government doing its job and
This is
enforcing
this
the
is what you,
rules.
this is what you call bad governance.
I
When
think
that
so.
when that
That's a
happens.
bad suggestion. Absolutely. I agree. So,
If any government, right, the idea is to have the smallest government apparatus possible with the least amount of cost on the taxpayer and encourage private industry, encourage, the free market to drive the economy. And then all of a sudden, guess what? You don't end up with monopolistic problems like Telem, like GB, like others, right? And I don't say this with any ill will towards anyone who is on the management team at either Telem or GB. But at the end of the day, if those companies were not owned by the government and if there was competition, there would be,
and we're going to talk tell
you
him
know,
too.
so let's talk Telem, right?
So
Because what
actually, I asked Ti,
yeah.
because there's a lot of discussions going around that Telem's on the verge of financial collapse, and I know that from discussions with some business owners, Telem supports office telephone solutions like that you have on your desk, right? So
Mhm.
office sets with multiple extensions, and then you need like a Mitel type switch, and handles your traffic, your incoming, allows you to forward
sip
calls, that
sip
kind of
sip trunks and all of that,
that
right?
kind of stuff. Well, apparently Telem has a problem with Mitel, and so those things always, in the end, for me, are always some sort of a financial problem, that you're not maintaining your relationship with your third party vendors. And so now the business owners are kind of stuck with not getting proper service because Telem is having issues with their third party. So I'm like, these are all indications that something's wrong.
Well, I'll give you a classic example. Um, I was just talking about competition in the free market. And, for so long, um, Starlink was
Mm-hmm.
deemed not allowed or illegal
It's
on the Dutch side.
correct.
Now it is.
Right.
Um, and lo and behold, and if you ask the people that tell them, they'll tell you that what they did to their network and the increase of, like, I used to have the fast plan was, I think, 60 down and 20 up, right? Now they changed the speed limit, the speeds on it to 250 down, 100 up for the same price. Right about the same time that, just after Starlink became legal on the Dutch side. And that's a classic example. Whether they're going to admit to it or not, you have to improve the quality of your product and make your product comparable to what the free market can offer. And, you know,
So indeed, they've upped their data
yeah,
packages, and more than
excuse me.
likely as a direct result of Starlink being present in the market.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this. I have both. I have
Yeah.
because We can't rely. We need to always be connected,
Right.
and at the radio, and our network, we're pretty heavy user, and before they upped the speed, I needed two providers, right,
and
bonded
and
together.
and businesses nowadays, more and more, the solutions like hotel reservation systems, very often now they're cloud based. So
Right.
so indeed, you need redundancy because you just can't afford to not be
Right.
able to connect to your software platforms. So,
Exactly.
but actually,
Exactly.
what Grisha mentioned is
Excuse me.
that they very much need to update their mobile network,
Mm.
and
They're still on.
government
They're still on 3G, I believe. 3G versus, in the U.S. You
LTE.
well LTE no LTE is what you see Flow having here.
Mhm.
Long term evolution that was between 3G. LTE was 4G, but in
Okay,
the
now it's
U.S. what you
5G.
now you're seeing 5G everywhere.
Yeah, and but government apparently is talking about supporting Telem and helping them to finance their mobile package upgrades. So yeah, it doesn't. She gave us the impression, or tried to give us the impression, that Telem's fine and it's going to, step back up. But I have my concerns, and I don't know if you've seen. I mean, I've seen articles about Starlink getting ready to come out at some point with their own
SIM card.
cell phone
Yeah.
service, right? Using their satellite network. So basically, you'll have a sat phone.
Well, T-Mobile has already partnered with them,
Okay.
and in the U.S., right? So Herb was telling me that he was part of the pilot
Okay.
group just by luck, and he literally was on a plane and picking up T-Mobile service from a Starlink satellite as he was flying.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, as he was flying. Let me do this. It is 8:36 right here in the Northeast Caribbean. Now time for the Amstel Bright Entertainment Calendar, brought to you by Amstel Bright, Island 92 and Z105.1 FM. And of course, you can of course, big thank you to everybody at Divico. If they usually have us on in Divico, so if you're listening in Divico, big round of applause. I want to hear the whole store cheer.
And
Eh.
actually, I'm going there right after this
I'll see you
because
later.
they have a special on chicken.
Oh,
So
there you
I'm
go.
going to go buy chicken right after the
Okay,
show.
let me know if we're on. Let me know if we're on there.
Okay.
That we were last time I was in it. So thank you to the whole gang at Divico. Here's everything that's happening tonight. Here's your Amstel Bright Entertainment Calendar. Well, welcome back to the program. Of course, Chevy Family Day is happening Saturday over at Real Auto. Special deals on the Colorado, the Tracker, and the Captiva. RBC will be there. ICWI will be there, and ACU will be there. Enjoy the hot dog bounty castle and all the fun stuff for the kids. Chevy Family Day this Saturday from 9 to 2. Amelia is with us. And so, what else happened yesterday?
So just as a note, we were talking about the car disposals and things like that, and so I asked the minister again. This was after because we didn't have enough time. Um, Indeed, I know some people who have to dispose of some oil from like car changes and things like that. And I said, so minister, what's the appropriate way to dispose of oil at the dump? Is there somewhere that you can, that they aggregate it? And he said, no, Emil, there's just no provision. So it got me thinking, like all those car wrecks, where they bring them to that salvage yard
Right.
there and they crush them. So all those have, a
Fluids and
few
all that.
gallons of oil in them, and they just crush them,
Transmission
and that
fuel.
must all just, seep down into the ground. And so I'm like, wow. So indeed, this is going to be part of their new solid waste management, but it just means all of this goes into the dump, gets, and leaches
Into the lagoon.
into the water. Yeah.
So not the lagoon, to the salt pond.
Yeah.
So
So he
the
did mention they're going to have on September 3rd at Bel Air. I think it's
community
about 7 p.m. So in the evening, he wasn't quite sure about the time, but they're going to have a sort of a public session where they can talk about, get public feedback on what they're going to do at the dump. And so, I recommend that people go. I think that people should make their voices heard. And I did ask him. I said, what's confusing to me is in the week before they said they've hired a consultant to help draft their waste authority ordinance, their waste policy ordinance. And so it seems to me like you should get the public feedback before you outsource the drafting of an ordinance. But he was trying to explain that they're two different things. And so I'll take him for his word, but I think I will try and go to that public session to hear what the plans are. I wish they would do that in the media, explain.
I think we could. I could think. I'm pretty sure I could solve the problem without any further nonsense. Right? It's really quite simple. We take the existing dump
Mm-hmm.
and we cap it. We completely cap it, and we build a big mountain, and we vent it properly.
Well,
And then let me finish.
Yeah.
And then we look for a very a big valley somewhere in the middle of nowhere, right? And then we build in that big valley when we have tons of, you know, space, right? We in this valley find a spot, right? And that's where we build a big incineration plant and a trash separation plant, and we begin to deal with this, and we use the incinerator to make electricity. So just go find the money
So
and do it, and stop screwing around.
so indeed, that
And
was
clean, and then after you cap the existing landfill, then you start to clean the salt pond.
well, actually, so I kind of agree with you. And actually, that was one of my questions. I said, look, because your policy on solid waste management, if you don't have any sort of incinerator or waste to energy plant, is going to be very different than if you do. So it seems to me that as Romy, you need to come out and sort of explain what the longer term vision is. And I'm going to recommend, and I'll post it on my Facebook. Maybe I'll put it on the Island 92 as well. The good thing about being late, right?
Mhm.
And St. Martin is usually late for many things. Is the good thing about it, though, is you can look all around the world and see who's done it the best, and then you just have to copy what they do, right? And I recommend that you look in Singapore because it's an island. Apparently, it's about the size of Dominica
Mm-hmm.
with a much more dense population, so they indeed have a trash issue. And how they manage their solid waste is amazing. And they have a video that explains it. And indeed, it's waste to energy, so it's like an incineration process, everything that will burn, and then they use that heat to generate electricity, and then the sludge they use. And actually, what they're doing with it is they're extending the land around because there's no more land.
Right.
So they've actually kind of taken two little islands, connected those with walls, made little areas in between where construction debris and the residue from the incineration go in to fill it, and they've turned it into a park. They've really done a nice job. And so, if St. Martin could do something similar to that, all you have to do is copy. That's the good thing about being late. And
Well, listen, we need to stop talking about
oh,
it,
in
and
which
we need
case,
to do it.
they actually could bring down the dump and sort of what they say mine the dump and use some of that material to feed the incinerator when the trash volumes drop.
Right.
So slowly over many years bring down that volume.
I think we need to stop talking about it, and we need to start doing it.
Yes.
Because I don't know how many years have you lived here?
Since 91, yeah.
Okay, so I came in 1981 for the first time as a teenager with very big hair, and I've lived here since 2007, and we've been talking about this since I was a teenager. Can we please get this done? It's
Yeah.
not that difficult.
It's right. And it has to be done. I mean,
Yeah.
because you see, just like what we talked about, the oil, right? I mean, it's a time bomb. You just keep on taking, whatever oil is left over and just dump it in there. Of course, we used to have fires all the time. Can you imagine? And what I understand actually is the dump is constantly on fire underground, and it's
Sure.
like smoking.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
So what else? A couple other things. Minister of TIOT talked about their investigation to bus and taxi licenses, and they're trying to figure out who actually owns them and whether the right people have them.
There was something in the paper today that said, was it yesterday or today?
Today.
Most taxi permit holders are Dutch nationals.
Right.
Okay, and many are over 60.
Right. But I asked, well, you see, politically, what happens is granting licenses and permits is unfortunately one of the ways that politicians buy votes.
Mm-hmm.
They hand out bus licenses and taxi licenses in order to generate votes. So the fact that most of them are Dutch passport holders, to me, makes total sense because they wouldn't give it to somebody who's not Dutch because they can't vote for them, right? So unfortunately, that's what has happened in the past. I mean, I've even heard politicians talk about that each license is roughly 15 votes. They figure between the person who actually receives the license, their family and friends, that it will translate into about 15 votes. So, but I asked, when you get a taxi license, it is supposed to be your sole source of income, right? So the idea was in the past, if you couldn't do anything else, at least you could drive a taxi, and that was the way that you would be able to sustain your family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's supposed to be your sole source of income, but instead there's many people who have a full-time job and then rent out the license, and it becomes supplemental income. Are you finding that? Are you finding that people have multiple taxi and bus licenses? And that's what I've heard in the past. Again, and some are former politicians who've received multiple licenses and then rent them out, and it's like their pension basically, right? That's not supposed to be. That some of the permits are given to companies, and again, these are supposed to go to individuals.
So when you get a permit for a bus or a taxi,
mm-hmm.
does that allow you to have one taxi or one bus, or is it?
No, one. Yes. And the only time that you don't actually drive yourself, so what they've done is they have what's called a hub chauffeur, like a help chauffeur. So as you get older, so again, remember the thinking. The thinking is that this is your only source of income. You're not really, able to do other types of jobs. And then indeed, as you're getting older and now have a hard time driving bus or taxi, but it's still what you depend on for your income, they allow you then to hire a driver to continue driving under your license
Mm-hmm.
so that you can still continue to get income. That was the intention, right? But now you find that some of the people have licenses, have full-time jobs, and then they just rent them out, and that's their way of getting extra income. And by the way, most of the time they're paid cash, and so it's no taxes.
Well, this is one of my other big problems,
mm-hmm.
is that everybody, I don't care if you're a taxi driver, I don't care where your passport is from, I don't care if you're born here or not, everyone who does business here should be paying their fair share of taxes.
Absolutely.
I pay mine. Nobody is exempt.
Right. right.
right? Everybody
And
should pay.
there's no, annual license fee. So there's not really any way to track, what the income is. So, and she said, indeed, they are finding exactly the things that I asked her about. So, that's a problem. And so I'm glad that she's digging into it. And what she's also alluding to is, I think there's over 600 taxis registered. And that's just the Dutch side, right? The French side also has taxis and buses,
Mm.
right? So I don't know. I have no idea what the French number is, but let's say it's 300. So you're talking about,
Thousand,
somewhere
a
around
thousand taxis.
900 to 1,000 taxis. You've totally oversaturated the market. And so the same people that you're trying to benefit don't have enough business to make a livelihood out of it. So, it doesn't bode well for the industry. And so indeed, I hope that she, makes some progress in terms of evaluating it and etc. So
Well, stick around. We'll be right back. 8:52. More with Emil Lee, St. Martin Insights, news that matters to you. Check. Check.
check, check.
Welcome back to the program. Please join me in welcoming back to the program my good friend Emil Lee. I have to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What's a biblical haircut?
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. Yeah. So it wasn't brought up in the press conference yesterday, but indeed, it's all over the media, all over social media as well. And indeed, I mean, you and I were talking about it before we went on air, and every image I know of Jesus has him
Well,
with
first of
long
all,
hair.
well,
So,
so first of all, this is all the Catholic School Board
correct.
trying to enforce a haircut policy.
Yes.
That what they say should be a biblical haircut. Now, the first thing that I find quite comical is that, first of all, Jesus was Jewish. Not number one. The other thing I find extremely comical: any image you've ever seen of Jesus Christ being portrayed, he's got long hair and a beard.
Right.
So I'm not sure what you mean by a biblical haircut. I don't understand that. Um, I think that first of all, any institution that takes public money really isn't a private school.
Mhm.
So therefore, you should have to live by the same rules as public schools. And
So
the Catholic School Board thinks differently, apparently.
so interestingly, and this has been one of my topics of conversation with the Minister of Education. The Ministry of Education for subsidized schools, of which the Catholic schools one, the only thing government can do is review their finances, whether they actually, I guess, spent the money according to how they say they would spend it. And they have otherwise no say in what happens there, which I find just alarming, right? So, and then I'm going to, now this is my opinion because I have my personal experience, with one of my children going to one of the Catholic schools. They have challenges. They have challenges with keeping teachers, right? If you remember at the end of last year, they had quite a few teachers that resigned. Um, I know personally, I've heard about discipline problems in the classrooms, the teachers being, frustrated with being able to manage their classes, that they're behind some of them in their curriculum, as they had to take their FBE exams, that they just weren't up to date with their teaching, keeping up to date with where they were supposed to be when the exams came into place. And so, if things were going really well, and again, you would expect that the Catholic schools were actually a more rigid and disciplined environment or structure. And this was part of their, let's say, sort of secret sauce in terms of this is how they managed the atmosphere in their learning environment, in their teaching environment. Okay, but what I've seen, they have so many other things that they should focus on before, you know, picking this as an issue,
I would agree with
to
you.
stick to.
So I just pulled up our Constitution,
Mm-hmm.
um, and here's what it says about religion.
Okay.
Everyone is entitled to profess freely his religion or belief, either individually or in a community with others, subject to his responsibility under national ordinance. Restrictions may be imposed by national ordinance on the exercise of this right outside of buildings and enclosed spaces in order to protect health in the interest of traffic and to combat or prevent disorder. I'm looking to see. Um, Education is free. Every child is entitled to obtain a general and formative primary education. That's Article 11 of our Constitution. So, it would seem to me that if you are taking public money, if you're taking taxpayer dollars, that you as a school should not be, since I have a free choice of religion, and you're taking public money, that means I have the right to go to that school as a taxpayer, as a child of a taxpayer, right? Then how can you legislate religion in school if you're taking public money? It just doesn't seem. It seems wrong to me.
And I think this is one of the shortcomings of government, that they had to actually make an agreement with the schools that the consequence of accepting public money is that you need to accept certain standards, certain guidance.
Yeah. So and to say that we're going to enforce a biblical style haircut policy or a biblical style haircut rule, um,
And again,
it's the wrong choice of words.
I'm going to go into my opinion,
Yeah.
right?
It's
The,
listen, we're very tight on time, so real quick.
so real quick, they're focused on in the primary school teaching traffic, right, as one of their subjects. I think that there's things that are
I'm
so
trying
much
not
more
to chuckle.
important in terms of how do we incorporate technology into our schools? How do we teach our kids how to use AI as a tool and not as a way to, shortcut doing their work? I think there's just other issues that are so much more important that I'd love to hear about rather than reading about this, to be quite
The
candid.
biblical haircut.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started. Emil, always a pleasure to see you, sir.
Same. Same.
And look forward to next week, next edition of St. Martin Insights, news that matters to you. We'll be right back. Your marine and tropical weather update, as always, brought to you by K Beach Club and Restaurant.